And thanks, Barney and all the members for showing up tonight. My first ever Zoom meeting, so my apologies from the start. So, but really looking forward to it. A little trick I've been told about Zoom meetings: always a cup of tea with no tea bag. Make sure it's full of rum. So, little trick there, guys. So I'll have a bit of a sip of that. And look, most of you guys have actually been on the water with me, so yeah, it's quite a privilege to share some information. It's what I love to do, is share some knowledge. And tonight is a subject, a little bit about me. I guess most members here would know myself. Full-time fly fishing guide for wilderness fly fishing. And owner of that business, where we focus in mainly on the northeast rivers and streams, and we also host trips overseas. And also I'm a guide out at the Millbrook Lakes, just west of Melbourne about now. So yeah, this discussion is going to be about stillwater midge fishing, which is it's a strange thing to say I'm passionate about, but I am super passionate about. And my obsession started particularly with midge fishing was about 12 years ago, and it was at Millbrook Lakes. I could not catch these fish that were rising and sipping through winter on the surface, particularly still evenings, and couldn't work them out. So I actually headed to the Millbrook Lakes myself and got shown around by a fantastic guide out there by the name of Philip Weigel, and he sort of pushed me to hunt these fish down when they're midge feeding, and then I guess I've progressed on from that, from what he's shown me over the past 10 years. So, and I'm going to share you all the information that I know about midge fishing. So, so I have a little presentation here, and we'll get right into that. Like I said, shoot any messages through to David. If it's not making sense, he'll be able to. I've got his voice coming through, so I could answer them now, and particularly at the end of the session here. So I'm going to share the screen and get into the PowerPoint presentation right now. And there we go. So let's get right into it. Okay. We're going to run through the biology and the entomology of the midge, the flies we use, the techniques and gear, and then locations and the best times when to fish. Okay. And I thought it's always a good opportunity whenever you can get an image or a photo of your dog up, why not? So here is, and you're wondering why would I put a photo up of my dog in winter? But this is up around the Millbrook Lakes area, where there's very close to marine res in those public waters. And we had a heap of snow up there last winter. And the reason why I brought this up, I headed out to one of the lakes up at Millbrook just to suss it out. It was quite still up there, and there were fish midge feeding on that snowy winter's day. So it's an important food source, the midge, throughout the winter months in particular, where most of the other food sources in lakes diminish, like mayfly, damsels, mud-eye will diminish from the summertime. And we've really got one bug that's out during the winter months, and that is the midge. So it's an important food source. It's really important. And because I remember myself when I would head out to the public waters, and I still do, I just go out there, put on a woolly bugger and strip like all day and not catch a fish, and wondered, I didn't know anything else. And I was just like, there's fish rising every now and again and oncing here and there. And here I am stripping a woolly bugger, and that's all I got. So I really was interested in the midge fishing. So, and small bugs doesn't mean small fish. As you can see, this is one from the lakes eating a tiny 16 buzzer. And we'll talk about buzzers and all this, and you'll understand what I'm talking about throughout tonight. But yeah, you can catch some cracking fish on midge. And most guys that have been out on Millbrook Lakes themselves would have probably caught one on a midge pattern. Okay, let's go straight into the biology of the midge. It's really important. If we understand the bug, we understand the flies, and then we understand how to fish those flies. So if we have a good understanding of the biology, it's critically important. Okay, so we've got the first stage. I'll start off at the larval or the bloodworm stage, which is where the bug starts off, and that's in the mud. So they'll live in the mud, in thousands of them in the mud. So, or particularly muddy bottoms, and they can live, which is quite amazing, and that's why it's a really good, important food source for fish, even in deep lakes. They can live in oxygen depleted areas of lakes, so where there's very little oxygen. So they can live in 40, 50, 60 foot of water. And then when they want to hatch, they'll ascend through that water column. So important food source through even the deeper waters here. So when I'm talking they ascend as a midge pupa. Then they hit the surface, and much like a dun, they'll push out of their shuck, push out, and then hatch out as the adult midge there. So that is the cycle, lays its eggs, larval stage, bloodworm. So there's one really important stage of this cycle that we'll talk about the most, and that's the pupa stage, because that's when fish feed on them the most. Okay, so the next stage, so we'll go through the first stage there. That's the bloodworm stage. As you can see, mostly browns to reds when they're at this stage. Living in oxygen depleted areas of lakes, they've got a high hemoglobin count. That makes them extremely red in colour. So that's important when it comes down to fly selection in terms of colour. And it is debatable whether fish see colours. So it's something to consider as well. So maybe not. So we'll move on to that. And as you can see, this next image here is what the bloodworms look like in the mud or the soil or sandy areas. So you can just have, I don't know where I read, but I think it was in 1 square foot in a lake in the UK, maybe 10,000, of these things just piled in. So where they're prevalent in certain areas of lakes, you can have just millions of these little guys, and they're one of the first aquatic insects to inhabit areas where there wasn't water. So particularly in our lakes, over the summertime, they drop and then fill up. They're one of the first bugs to get in that new ground. So that's something else to consider when you're fishing. Okay, the most important stage is the pupa here. That's probably when they're at their largest stage. So when they're as a pupa, we've seen them at the lakes where they're size 10s. So I guess people associate midge being tiny little bugs. Yes, they are sometimes, but the pupa stage here, we've definitely seen them up to size 10s, huge guys. I've got a little image later coming up where you'll see these huge bugs. Generally around size 14 covers most of it. So if you want to go out blind, just tie a midge pupa on. The size 14 is always a good start. As you can see, the little breathers, there's a better image. So we've got 2 sets of lungs, just like ourselves, but our lungs are up here. They got one on their head there, and another one at their bum. And it's one of the things I think that when trout are feeding on the midge pupa, it's one thing that triggers the fish is that little white bit on the top and on the bottom there. So for your fly ties out there, just remember to put those little white bits on the bottom and tops of your flies there. Okay. And as you can see, I guess very much like the mayfly, I mean, apart from the mayfly having to dry its wings, they just ascend and just pop almost straight out. So they don't get caught up as much as the mayfly in this pupa stage, ascending through the thorax there. But when they're doing this, when they're popping out and the shucks coming off, they look huge in the water when they're in that process. So something to consider, little clink hammer flies, 14, but then a nice big bit of antron that hangs off the back of them, because that will trigger the fish into eating as well. Here's another image of the midge breaking out through the thorax there. Just a beautiful bug. If you don't get excited about the bug, well, then you're not excited about midge fishing. So I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to bugs. So so that's him there. And that's Philip's image there of one at Millbrook. So as you can see, generally greys, browns and greens, the actual body of the adult, bright greens, various flies, colours. So from browns to greens to black is the adult. let's talk about the adult stage. It's probably, I wouldn't say it's the least important, but it's one I get excited about because if they're on the dry fly, we all get excited about dry fly fishing. And like I said, the pupa is the most important stage, but if the fish get really active, we want to have a dry fly on. And that's the adult there. So we got, as you can see, greys there, grey bodies. One of the big ones we have out towards the lakes around the Ballarat district is that guy there, quite bright green. We're actually out today checking out some lakes and that guy was hatching, that bright green one. So bright green clinkhammer, something like that would be a good imitation of that guy there. And when there's a big hatch on like that, it's time to get excited because they will start coming through that. I guess if there's any people that have fished Tasmanian lakes, they might have experienced, a big midge hatch and a morning mop up. So when they die, the midge overnight will die and fall in the water like that and form in the wind lanes, and fish come through it, just like krill, like whales through krill. The trout will do a similar thing with that and come out with their mouth and through loads of that. And we call it midge balling. You can call it what you like, but it's bloody exciting when that happens. Okay, as you can see, this is the lee side wind of a boat there. And you can see they do like that. So if you've got logs in lakes or a bit of protection, they'll tend to ball up the adults around in that lee side of structure, logs, even points on lakes. So it's a good place to start off. So it's pretty exciting when they're going through that. And at the Millbrook Lakes of late, it's been fantastic midge hatches like that on the evening. Again, I'm just going to reiterate, most important stage is the pupa, okay? So as you can see, that's a shuck from the lakes there. That's 10 to 12 mil big, and good, it's probably 2.5 mil thick. So it's a decent food source for the trout in winter when there's not a lot around to have. So when they're on them, they're on them. So it's important to have the right flies as well. Okay, let's go through the fly selection. So we know a little bit about the bug itself now. So what flies do we use? My go-to fly would be that guy there when it comes to, and we'll talk a little bit about one-sing fish and the techniques later. But if I'm searching and there's not a whole lot happening, that red buzzer, okay? And if we have any fly ties out there, make sure you're ribbing on most of your buzzers. So this is imitating that pupa stage. Make sure the ribbing is quite pronounced. So make sure it's contrasting. So that's something like a little bit of hollow tinsel there, silver. And then I'm not sure if you can see that, but on the cheeks there, it's red holographic. And then it's just a super glue buzz, a bit of super glue. And again, the lung on the top there of the fly. So that's usually a bit of antron works well there. Okay, for all the fly ties out there. The other colors are green, black, and brown. So they're the other colors, but the go-to would be the red buzzer. We're going to talk about how to fish them, but we're generally using, most of the time, or we are using 2 flies at a time. So that one I tend to fish on the point fly. We'll talk about point flies and top flies shortly, but when we're using 2 flies, I try to fish this one as close to the bottom as possible most of the time. Knowing that the bloodworm, that red color is on the bottom. So fish that are cruising on the bottom will tend to pick up the red color. But, what's better than one midge, two red buzzers, one on mid-water and one close to the bottom. It's just finding where the fish are. Okay, let's go through. So we've got red, green, black, and brown. The sizes that we use out at the lakes, 16 through 12 through to 16s, but the most common size is a 14 buzzer. Okay, again, that you can see the black there, really pronounced ribbing, and that red flash on the side, and then that little lung at the top there. Okay, green, as you can see, really clear ribbing. Also, bead-headed flies are really important. Usually, this time when we're actually at physical meeting, I'll be passing these flies around and showing you some more options. And I do have my fly box here. It's going to be a little bit hard to see, but we'll run through some other flies. But bead heads are important, particularly on windy lakes, which I don't know any lakes that aren't windy. So really important to use bead-headed flies. And we'll talk about that with the technique shortly to anchor down your flies and not having them drifting up in the surface. We see a lot of times windy lakes, people using unweighted flies, and the flies tend to drift around the surface. And we know most of these fish, you know, midday are feeding on the pupa or the bloodworm close to the bottom. We need to get that point fly, bottom fly drifting as close as possible. And we can use bead-headed flies for that. I say I tend not to use tungsten, but I end up using tungsten beads a lot, just smaller beads. But ideally, you'd like to use copper, not tungsten, just to get a nice slow drift down, because fish will take it on the drop as well. Beadhead black buzzer there. Green one. As you can see, the ribbings there pronounced with the silver ribbing. There's the red buzzer in a fish's mouth. Yeah, that's quite a large one. That's a size 12 just there. Yeah, so really important to have those colours. And I'm going to talk about, I've been playing around with a bunch of flies over the last 3 seasons, and I've had great success with another bunch of flies I'll go through shortly in terms of the pupa at the end of this session here. So we'll move straight into the adults now. So when they're really on the top and taking off the surface, the Griffith's gnat is a fantastic dry fly option, particularly on the evening when they're going. But we've caught, if you have a midge hatch during the middle of the day, it's a great option as well. And now everyone looks at this and thinks, am I at a midge presentation or am I at a mayfly presentation? Because most people would associate this fly with mayfly fishing, dun fishing. I guess most people that fish Tasmania would be familiar with this fly, but it is a cracking fly when the midge are thick and balling up, and particularly on the evening, to use as your top fly. And we'll talk about active midge fishing shortly, but it's one we use particularly when they're hatching, you know, and the fish are up on the surface. We generally use 2 flies, so we'll, off the back of that possum emerger there, we'll hang the buzzer or a pupa off the back, the red buzzer, the green coloured buzzer, the millie midge off the back. And depending how active the fish are, that will determine how long our dropper off the back of that fly is, okay? If you fish with Philip Weigel, he usually likes this fly as a top fly, as a dry fly, and that's the carrot fly. I guess like it is, it's just silhouette, and it's a bit of, when you've got a million midge hatching, it's a bit of look at me. So that's where that one comes into play. Great fly. I don't use it enough, and I should, because it works extremely well. And high vis clink hammer, yeah, or high vis parrot. I keep on saying high vis because most of the hatches are generally low light condition or on the evening, early morning. So just having a high vis post just, you know, allows you to see the eat a little bit quicker, particularly if you've got the buzzer hanging off the back of that fly and it does take that buzzer, you can react quicker to it having a high vis, and the trout don't care at all that it's high vis at all. So that's another great fly to pull around when they're on the dries. But like I said, we always using the buzzer. The buzzer off the back of that, the little wet buzzer, is our insurance policy. Okay, I want every fish to be on the dry fly, but it's not always the case. They usually eat the buzzer, I would say 70% of the time, 80% of the time. I don't know where I pulled those statistics out of. I just made that up, but it sounds good. Okay. All right. Everyone's asking, does a guide have secret flies? I shouldn't be telling everyone about this. It's fine. So we talked about using 2 flies, and I guess when we run through the setup shortly and how to fish or the techniques we use, these will come into play. But like I said, we're always using 2 flies on the one line. And like I said, over the last 2 or 3 seasons, I've been playing with a bunch of different flies to use in conjunction with your buzzers. And we all know the one on the top right-hand corner, the stick caddis. So we tend to use that a little bit higher on the top dropper. Great fly. That one was tied by my mate Kyle. So I think Kyle might be on tonight. So g'day, Kyle. So that's his tie there. Great pattern to use in conjunction with your buzzers or your point flies. But I've been playing a lot around with, if you can see on the left-hand side of your screen there, check nymphs, which is, we associate them with river fishing. So especially see that red collar leggy on your left side, halfway down. That style of fly is a perfect, because they're tied thin, in a super thin body to cut the water in rivers, but they are the perfect midge imitation. Those little river flies there, curved body, bit of a thorax there, and I do like that one with those little bits of highlights, a little bit of have a look at me amongst the crowd. Okay, and also those French. That's a Frenchie there. Skinny body, all those European nymphs that you thought, okay, I'm only going to use that in the river season. No, break them out and start using them in the lakes. They're great on your point flies. Like I said, use a weighted, particularly with wind. Use that on your point fly. And the last few seasons, a lot of fish have come on those types of flies. The other few that we see there is hothead, pretty much hothead nymphs, black body, and then your pheasant tail. There's a lot of fish as well, particularly where you got rainbow trout, and even the brown trout early in the season. They'll tend to have a look at these hot-headed nymphs. There's a few fish, into that spawn mode. So it works really good in conjunction with your buzzers, and also the trusty pheasant tail nymph there. So there's some flies I use conjunctions with when I'm using two flies. They're not really on the buzzers. We'll run through these flies as well. Okay, gear and setup. So this is a pretty important part of tonight's discussion. I've got some rods set up here with the setup. I'm just going to stop sharing this, so we'll get back to that shortly.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop that now and just kick back to...
That's great.
Now you can see me on the large screen, I'm guessing, I'm hoping?
Yep.
Great, all right. So we're going to go through three techniques that we use in the lakes, three most important. So the flies that we're using now. So we're going to run through the techniques, okay? And the three techniques are static, active, and then naked, okay? So, and naked not meaning there's heaps of fish rising. Let's take, your clothes off, David. Leave your clothes on, okay? So okay, I'll run through the static one. Now, most of us, when we roll up to lakes, what do we see generally? Bugger all. We roll up to lakes and there's not a whole lot moving, and you're looking at a vast expanse of water, okay? Straight away, I'm thinking the static technique. We know that the fish aren't high in the water column. So straight away, I'm thinking longer tippets and leaders, and static. So a lot more, we know the fish aren't that active. So we're going to slow down. We're going to slow our fishing down to match them. So don't go to your lake and start ripping woolly buggers, all right? Go to the lake, think about it, okay? And think there's just not a lot of fish moving, so, and ripping woolly buggers will work a lot of the time, as well. But just think, well, actually the fish aren't active. I'm not going to be so active as well in terms of my fishing. So this is one we use a lot at the lakes, and it's pretty much the go-to most of the time. And I'll run through the rig. Actually, I'll run through the gear quickly, like this one here. I'm sure if you can see, this is what do we got here? The Lamson Waterworks here. And this is one of the center axis rods. So it's got that funny handle here on the end. I'm not sure if you can see that. Doesn't matter, 5 or 6 weight. On a nice day, run a 5 weight, but generally go for a 6 weight. I've got the flies caught. A floating line. A floating line's fine. Slightly aggressive taper on your fly line in case that wind kicks up, which it does on the lakes. 9-foot 3X leader. Okay, just a tapered leader, and then 3X tippet. Okay, so we set up a 9-foot leader straight away. And with all these droppers and everything, we're going to probably be around that sort of 14, 15 foot mark with this technique. Even longer, sometimes 18, 20 foot. And everyone goes, that's long, I won't be able to cast that. we regularly get beginners out of the lakes and they cast 20-foot leaders, no problems at all. Okay. So I'm just pulling this out now. So we'll have a look at the setup. So we've got here on our 9-foot leader, a New Zealand strike indicator. I find this indicator really good as it's just wool yarn. It flies through the air beautifully. You know, it doesn't affect your two flies. I've used a bunch of other indicators. I find this one really well, but just go with whatever your favorite indicator is, that's fine. And I find this one's good as well because if the fish are down deep, we can, I'm not sure if you can see that, we can slide it and shorten up if we're in shallow water, or we're back in the deep water, we can slide and make it deeper, okay? So we've got to our first fly, so we're using 2 fly rigs all the time with this technique. And we've got, as you can see here, I'm going to sort of pan across here, the screen. We've got about 2 foot to our first dropper. And this is where you join your extra, 3 foot of 3X tippet. And you can use, I'm using a blood knot there. Most guys would use a surgeon knot. You just use whatever knot you're, joining knot you're comfortable with, okay? But leave a tag end of around about 12 to 15 centimeters to your buzzer or your first fly. It's not always a buzzer, it could be a stick caddis. So that there. And then below that, and at the moment, like right at the moment, most fish are lethargic. The water temps drop. We're having a lot of frosty starts, so they're cruising along the bottom. So we've got quite a long setup here. So we've got that buzzer there, and another 2.5, 3 foot to our point fly. And this is what I'll be using tomorrow. I'll be on the water tomorrow, and that is the guy there. So that's that's one of those little check nymphs. I'm not sure if you can see that. I'll hold it nice and still. Little red collar here. And sorry, my dog's about to walk through the fly line. So we've got that little red collar buggy there. And that's a bead-headed fly because I want to anchor down. Most of the fish are lethargic at the moment, so I'm getting that fly as close to the bottom as possible. Okay. So we cast out that rig. Okay. We watch the other side. We watch the other side of this indicator, the fly side. We wait for it to drop, and you'll see it drop. It will take a little bit. It'll drop down, and you'll have that indicator floating. You know now that your point fly is down at about 4 foot. You know it's in that zone where you want it. And then what we do is we draw the indicator, which draw the flies as we draw it across 40 centimeters. They rise, the flies. Sorry, I've got a dog and a baby going wild here. So just one moment. She's not happy because she's not on the water. See what happens? Okay, so as we land the flies, they sink down. And what we do, this is the static part of this fishing. It can be really dull for some people. I know fellow guide Mark Weil just can't stand this thing. It's just too boring, but he catches a lot of fish. Go slow. So what we do is we draw this with our left hand, our stripping hand. We draw this across the surface. We want to wake this indicator, form a wake. So not slow. We want it to, and not a fast strip either. We want to just slide, more of a slide across the surface by about 40 centimeters. And that allows the flies, the anchored flies, to rise up in the water column like that, and then settle again, mimicking that rise of the pupa as it would in the natural environment. So it comes up, it slides up, and that's a real trigger point for the fish. So they see that movement, that vertical movement from the bottom up, and a lot of the times you'll just slide and about to settle, and shoop, it'll get pulled under and fish on. So that is the static technique. I have a little video as well that I'll show. It might be a bit jumpy, how it actually looks like on the water there, okay? So that's when nothing's happening. We're at the lakes, and you're thinking, I'm gonna have to just strip a woolly bugger. No, you're not, okay? I want you to try this first, okay? So get that static fishing going. And you always say, if you want your flies to the bottom, where is the bottom where you're fishing? And the good thing about most of our lakes out towards Ballarat, they're quite shallow. So generally, you're not fishing much more than about 2 meters of water, but you might find areas lakes that are deeper. Just keep on extending, sliding that indicator until your point fly starts to hook the bottom. It's easy. Then you hook the bottom, then slide it, 10 centimeters up, and then that point fly is just cruising around close to the bottom where the fish are. Okay, so that's the static fishing, midge fishing. Okay, and my fly's going over the back. That's your. Now the next one is active. This is a 6-weight rod here. I do like softer tip rods if you've got one. It's just slightly slow when they're up on the surface, just because the takes can be quite aggressive and you don't want to break off the finer tippet. But we're still using 3x tippet in this guy here. So this is when fish are moving, okay? So, and when I mean moving, like really going, like they're up and about, but sometimes the midge hatch is ordinary, just oncing every now and again here and there, but we still use a more active technique, and that's moving the flies, okay? In here, we've got that carrot fly that I talked about earlier, and a piece of line, just like you would in your river fishing, hang a nymph off a dry fly, off the bend in the hook there, and the midge pupa off the back of it. So that's your floating dry fly. And what you want to do with this guy, as the fish get more active, you can then retrieve this fly constantly by figure 8 or even long, slow draws. And that'll keep that fly that's only 10 centimeters below, it'll start moving it up in the water column where the fish are. If the fish are less active in that time, draw. Again, it's more like the static one, draw and drop, allow it to sink down. Particularly early on in the hatch when they're just starting, I'll have this dropper length. It could be a meter under the surface below this dry fly. And I'll just, throughout the hatch as it progresses and gets busier, shorten up. So you're following the fish through the water. The more active they get, the more active you get with your changes as well. So that's when they're really going like this. This pupa can be as close as that off the back. Okay, I'm talking 3 centimeters off the back, and your retrieve's active, constant. Keep it up near the surface. Remember, put the fly where the fish is. It's as simple as that. Okay, but sometimes it's difficult because when you've got a midge hatch of millions of midge, yours is one of a million. So then you can make it stand out. I would suggest going a slightly larger size than what you think's hatching. That can make yours stand out. Or you can use little, I'm not sure if you can see that. This is a milli midge, and it has a little bit of a red hot spot on the head. It's a bit of, have a look at me. I'm the one you want to eat, okay? So that's your more active when the hatch is going, particularly on the evenings. Keep your flies moving, keep them up in the water column. If it dies down, draw and drop it. Get it back down to where the fish are. Just move with the fish. Okay, the other technique is the naked technique, and it's a great technique as well for oncing fish, or there's just the odd fish around, and that's I'm going to use this as an example, but again, this fly rig, because the rig's very similar to the dry dropper rig. You can just use 2 midge patterns. We tend to use a larger midge on the top on this one here, and then a smaller one on the point fly. And there's no indicators, nothing. You're just casting out. It works particularly good when they're rising as well. Cast them out. You can use some floating on your main leader and just keep on figure 8ing the 2 flies. It's just 2 flies are going to get, one's going to get seen or the other one. So, and keep on figure 8ing, keep on drawing the 2 midges past the fish. We usually keep them a little bit more spaced out, so around your 30 centimeters. So that's the naked fishing. And it's a good technique as well. You can let your fly sink down if there's not a lot happening. 10-second count, and then slow retrieve, or then become more active with the fish. So that's your techniques there. Does that make sense for everyone? The 2 or the 3 techniques. But like I said, the static one is the main one we use when a lot of fish are lethargic or they're not really active during the day. Just remember, those pupa around all day. You'll find midge always on the water. I'll quickly go through a little bit of my gear here that I used throughout the midge fishing season. So one really good product for that indicator, that wool yarn indicator, is, giving that one a little bit of that paste. So it's a wax-based floatant. So a lot of you will be familiar with like oil-based floatants, like products like that there. But that, when you put that on your leaders and on your, I guess even on that wool yarn, it helps. But it's a wax-based floatant here. Have a look. I'll show you that there. It's almost out there. It's sticky, so it sticks on your leader. So it's what you use for leaders, especially butt sections of leaders to make it float. So when we're using that static technique, we've got a bit of wax on that wool yarn and the leader above it. So it's really floating. It's floating high, and then below that, all your flies are subsurface. Little fly dryer here. That's my New Zealand indicator tool that broke, so it's just sort of just dabbed in there at the moment.
You okay?
Yeah, sorry, just said some updates cannot be installed or just cancel. That's right. I'm still going, am I?
Yeah.
Something weird just popped up.
That's all right.
Yeah. And just it looks like a lot going on here, but just be organised with your fly box. This part here and up, they're all my Midge patterns. This part is all those nymphs that I was talking about, weighted with hotheads, and stick caddis here, and a bunch of unweighted flashbacks for shallower water. So you do want a good range of weighted flies and unweighted flies for fishing. That's the little high-vis parachute atoms that I like to use during midge hatch there. So I use that in the rivers as well, but it's a great one to use as your active midge fishing and tying off the back of that your little buzzer. And the other side that's in there, that's a bunch of your colourful woolly bugger stuff. So yeah, so just have a good range of size of flies and weight and a few colours there. On that side there, that's your floating. Your tippet spools there. Generally 3X is the go. If you really think you're getting less seats, you can step it down to 4X. Trying to go any lighter than that, you start getting the old snappos then. But yeah, 3X is the go-to tippet diameter you want there, which is sort of that. I don't know, I don't go by breaking strain anymore, but usually around 6 to 8 pound if you want it in that range there. All right, we'll get quickly back. That was all the techniques there. I'll go back to sharing on screen here. Back to the gear and setups.
That's great.
Okay, and we'll just go. Now this is a video. It may be a bit jolty, but this is the technique I was talking for that static fishing here. So this is Chris showing that. It's going to be a figure 8, just to keep in contact, because when we've got wind, it may form bows in your line. Don't worry about the bow too much. When that indicator goes under, use a trout strike and it'll take up the slack. So don't worry if there's bows formed. I see a lot of people trying to mend them out. Don't worry about them too much. Just track your rod tip around with the slight bend in your line. Okay, so we'll play this through here. So figure 8, just keep in contact with not moving the flies, and then a long draw, 40 centimeters slide in the indicator. It's probably a little bit fast there. Slow down, Chris. So slow figure 8, and then that's a better one, Chris. Well done, about 40. This is what the indicator will look like on the water. So it's static there, and then that's that draw. That's that wake of the indicator, drawing the fly's surface. Could have been a bit longer. Let it sit static, long draw, let it sit, let them settle. Okay, and see, long, perfect, Chris, well done. Long draw, and that's the end result there. Some of you guys probably fished that lake. That's the Cavern Lake.
Another midge feeder bites the dust.
And small flies, big fish.
Another cracking midge feeder. Took the red buzzer, perfect, beautiful.
Great. So I'm not sure if that was clear on the video there, but that's that slide that you want when you're static midge fishing there. Okay. A real killer technique, particularly on waters like Millbrook Reservoir. It's a really good one to use out in the middle of the day there. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the best locations to do all this stuff. We'll talk about public waters at the start, and then we'll talk about a little bit about Millbrook, since we've got some members on here tonight. Now, one of the best locations is, I did this when I thought of a good midge lake. I thought Mirrabel Reservoir, and it's just that perfect sort of Midge Lake. So, and it holds some beautiful, stunning browns in there as well. So here's a map of Mirrabel Res. Now this could be any lake, anywhere. This could be an arm of Eucumbene. This could be a Tassie lake. Just think of about the same way. This is when I go to a lake, it doesn't overwhelm me. All that I'm thinking, there's a few things I'm thinking about, and the main one is prevailing winds. Okay, so understanding where the wind direction is coming will help you position yourself on the lake for where the most midge activity is. Okay, so where are I usually ask a question here and people yell out across the floor, but what are our prevailing winds, Victoria? Most of the time, I'll answer myself because it's weird because no one's answering. They're northwesterlies, and then we have cooler southwesterly changes. So generally from that northwest direction right around to the southwest. So that direction there on Mirrabel Reservoir. Northwesterly, southwesterly. And you ask, why do winds matter? Because the midge love hatching where it's a little bit of ripple and where it's calm, okay? So knowing where the prevailing winds are coming from, you know where to position yourself on the lake. So as you can see up the top there, where that top arrow is, there's a point up there. Oh, let me just go to the next image. There you go. Okay, so that will help you. So that prevailing winds there forms a little bit of shelter on those lee sides there where the midge will hatch, okay? Or most likely to be good numbers of midge. So we want to put ourselves where the food is. And if the food's there, the fish will be there. Okay, so the southwesterlies push up near the wall. That wall side's good. The inside of those points there, all in that back corner there's great on the lee side. So think about those areas on any lake. Know where your prevailing winds are, and try and choose those days where there is a little bit of breeze, not a lot, because that will help concentrate the fish. Glassy days are a bit harder because you can find midge popping everywhere, but you'll find most of the fish will congregate around these areas. Sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, sorry, Scott, just quickly, can you just go back to that previous slide?
Yep, that one.
Thanks.
So that is Mirrabel Res. You got your wall down the sort of southern end there, Spargo Creek Road. I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with that. That's the main car park. A great spot's just up from the car park there on the left-hand side, in the left-hand bay of the wall there. So great, it's good, got good cover from both those prevailing winds. Okay, is it okay to move to the next slide there? So we will.
Yeah.
So those yellow markers indicate that, but this could be any lake. So I'm not saying, as you can see from this image, it's quite low, the lake. So just consider when this is high, right up that top end, it could be a lot better because you've got tree coverage and things like that. So, yeah, so it doesn't really matter. Just know where your prevailing winds are and try and work with them, so position yourself where the food is. Okay. And let's talk about, we've gone down, this is actually back to the cabin lake at Millbrook, but this could be anywhere on any lake. And this is quite typical where we've got calm. So we've positioned ourselves, let's say on the southwest side, you've got a calm area, and then you've got ripple, perfect. And you'll find the midge love to hatch. And I don't know how they do this or how they communicate this. They love emerging and hatching where that calm meets the ripple. And I'm sure we've all experienced, or most of us experienced, trout rising at bloody 180 feet right on that midge line towards the evening. It's just because the food's there. So if it is pushing out, walk around the lake, try and find where you would position yourself where the calm meets the ripple. Okay. And as you can see, if you were to walk around the left here, around clockwise from where this photo is taken, you can see you can position yourself right on that calm ripply edge there. And we'll move that there. So that's the midge line, I call that. So that's the one we have. That's the one we have just on every lake and any lake. Obviously with wind gusts, that moves, like they could move 10 foot that way and 12 foot the other way and back off and change. But just position yourself where it mainly is the calm ripple edge, okay? So that's the midge line. So right there, even there's no fish rising today, I want I want to put the client to the left here, casting slightly in the ripple, draw and dropping through that midge line there. So I'm putting my flies where the food is, and that's where the fish will be. Okay. All right, and that's one fish on the midge line there, on a little millie midge there. Okay. And it's a good spot to get ready for that midge hatch. You know, just think that's where the calm ripple edge has been all day. I'm going to put myself there. Okay. All right. My top 5 midge lakes are here to the left, but this changes a bit because year to year it changes. But these are the more common or the best places to start. And the first one, of course, is Mirabel Res, quite close to Melbourne as well. And it's fished extremely well this season. Lake Wendouree is a great one, and you can do that on foot, particularly around the island section of the lake, if you're familiar with that, where the playground is, and also where the rowing lane is on the southwest corner there. Another great one, if you want to try it out, is Wombat Res. Really well, it's got a lot of cover there. That's near Dalesford, small lake, if you haven't fished it. It's a great one to catch your first fish on midge feeders. They readily midge fish throughout the winter months there. Bit of a, I guess, sometimes can be a really good one and not so good is Tullaroop Res. But you'll always find them. Use particularly your bead heads there at Tullaroop, your bead head buzzers, or those Czech nymph style buzzers, I call them now. And Newland Res is a great one. Also, you know, Hepburn, when it used to fire, was another good midge fishery as well. So they're the top 5 midge fishing lakes. You know, I am focusing this discussion mainly around the Ballarat area. Of course, Yukon Bean's fantastic midge fishery through winter. Like if you're not midge fishing at Yukon Bean, well, get on it, particularly with black coloured buzzers. So it's an absolute ripper lake to midge fish. All right, so that's it. And obviously, just a little bit about Millbrook Lakes, where I work, which is a great place to come learn. I'm pretty sure Red Tag, I think you guys are coming out. I think you were due out. Maybe if we had to change the dates, but yeah. So if you do get an opportunity to come on the club trip or come out for some guiding, it's a fantastic fishery to learn how to midge fish. So we've got 14 new lakes in the last 12 months. So we're up to a total of 26 lakes. So even if you've been up before, it's quite exciting. There's a bunch of new lakes to explore as well. We're introducing to the lakes tiger and cheetah trout, which is really exciting. A tiger being a hybrid, which is brook brown cross, and a cheetah is rainbow brook cross. So they don't go into spawn mode, which is fantastic news. So they just feed really hard through the winter months as well. And these big dogs, yeah, exactly. So we're trialling a lake at the moment where the fish have been in for about 6 months. And yeah, so hopefully one day it'll be a great option, you know, particularly, you know, through that dun or late dun season or your mud-eye fishing, we'll just go, let's go catch a big cod. So it'll be a good experience to, you know, possibly land your first Murray cod and fly. So this has got nothing to do with midge fishing, by the way. You will not catch them on midge. Got no interest. Okay. Probably on duck flies or something like that, something big. Yeah, and thanks for watching. Now I'll throw. That's about it from me.
That was great.
So, yeah, yeah. So I hope I didn't bore you too much with that, or it didn't go too long.
No, not at all. Not at all. I took some questions through chat during the course of the talk, so maybe I'll start with those, and then other people can jump in.
Yeah.
If you want to stop sharing your screen so we can see you, that might be.
I'll just stop share. Yep.
Thank you. So how can you tell if the fish are taking pupa or adult midge?
Yep. So the pupa's a real easy one. You'll see nothing happening. So it's all done subsurface. The pupa can be taken obviously in the film. We do get a lot of times at lakes where there's fish rising and there's nothing on the surface. Okay, so that's a sure indication they're on the pupa in the surface. They're just clipping them off before they hatch. So that's a time when to use a pupa. I didn't go through one fly here which you could use for that. So that's like the pupa in the film. So you can use things like clink hammers, but something like this little buzzer here. So I'm not sure if you can see it. It's got a little bit of wool and a tiny piece of like 4-pound mono, and it keeps that pupa right up in the film there. It's a great little fly for those fish that are actually taking the pupa in the surface. But most of the pupa feeding's done subsurface. You're not going to see them. So you can assume that if there's no fish rising, they're not on the adults, they're on the pupa.
Okay. Another question was, do colours diminish at depth in water due to a lack of UV?
Jeez. Is this from a scientist? Or,
oh, yes. Yeah, he's a scientist. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I'm not sure. But one thing you can do, I tend to fish black flies with a really pronounced ribbing in deeper water. So really, if you are fishing in deeper water, make sure the ribbing is, a really good contrast on your flies.
Okay, thank you. Now you might have answered this after this question came through, but it's how best to estimate the depth of water column, which I think you kind of referred to with adjusting the depth of the bottom fly.
Yeah. Now that's another really good question. Like I said, the point fly and the top fly that we talked about that comes off that top dropper, I always space them out. Don't have them too close. I see sometimes people using their point fly and their top fly, 30, 40 centimeters apart. I think sometimes that might cause confusion for a trout or two flies. So have them spread out, your top dropper and your point fly a good distance apart, usually around 2 to 3 foot. And then you can adjust your indicator accordingly to that. So you can fish that top fly. If you wanted to slide that indicator, that top fly can be a foot under the surface and your point fly and, that 3 foot under still. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, there's a heap of... Oh, the next one was, can you talk on the merits of a tippet ring on a fly?
I think that was an image I showed of that clink hammer with a tippet ring. Yep. I think it's a great concept. I don't use them too often, no. So you can just use off the, tie off the shank. I really like the concept of it, but it doesn't make much difference at all.
Okay. Lots of compliments here. Great presentation, Scott. Thanks. Fantastic presentation. Very informative. Well done. Heaps of really good information. Question, what depths of water are you typically targeting?
Yeah, that's another really good question. It's funny because I always think, even myself, day to day when I'm guiding, I'm always having a look at shallow and deep water. It's as simple as that. So what you want to do is explore the shallow and deep water and go between both as much as you can, because in the mornings you can find sometimes when there's a frost, the shallows can be devoid of all fish, and then in the evening it's full of fish. So it's important to keep on exploring those areas and keep on watching out and looking. There's no thing where they're always going to be in deeper water or shallow water. I mean, points on a lake are a really good start. You've got both of that. You've got that, the shallow and the deep water either side of the point, so you can let it drift over the shallow to the deep water. So that's a good place to start, and where I'd start on most lakes is a point.
Okay, and got another one here. For newbies, can you make your own woolen indicator?
You can make, you can make your own woolen indicator, and there's just, you can do it like a half inch with a bit of wool yarn. I do like that New Zealand strike indicator. Like I said, I can change the depth really quickly. There's no kinks in the line. It's really good system to use. Yeah.
Been a bit. That's better. Okay, and another one. How would you fish a bloodworm?
The bloodworm itself, I will still indicate a fish the bloodworm, and I do tend to stick to that red buzzer and fish it as close to the bottom as possible. So you want to use that red buzzer just cruising along the bottom. You know, there will be fish that knows, you know, that will tail into that mud, you know, and really go in for those flies. But generally speaking, most of the fish that I see do that, when we chuck the red buzzer out at them, they zoom over and grab the fly on the drop.
Does water temperature change the hatch times?
I would say yes. Yes, most of the time I find it's more UV, so sunlight. So some of the, if you can have a good daytime midge hatch, you're looking at, you know, a cloudy day with light breezes. And it was in May during the lockdown. We were doing some work around the lakes, and we saw an amazing midge hatch, middle of the day. You know, 20, 30 fish just readily rising in shallow water. It's hard to say whether that was water temperature, but I would say more it was the UV. So low light conditions, they tend to hatch more towards dusk, low light during the day or mornings, or even overnight.
Excellent. Okay, I might just throw it open now. If someone's got a question, just switch on your audio and ask Scott.
Don't be afraid.
Everyone's struck on.
G'day, Scott. Barney here, mate.
Hey, Barney. Hey, mate.
Yeah, and you are right, Red Tag. Just today, I've teed up a weekend coming up later in the year to go up to Millbrook. So we missed out when COVID shut us down, but we've locked in a weekend later in the year to have 10 or 12 of us up there. Good to see you, doggy.
Yes,
Scotty, at this time of the year, there's both midge, but there's also smelters around. Have you got a couple of killer smelter flies to just...
yeah, it's been a really good smelting year. Like I said, most of the do you want to just grab it? So most of the smelting fish is in late March. So, but we've had really good smelters right through. So I usually have one rod set up with smelting patterns, and then one with a midge. But this is a killer pattern. There's two patterns that I like here. And I guess you're all familiar with I'll show you three patterns that work really good on smelting fish at the moment. But this guy here, not sure if you can see that. So it's like it's a chartreuse bead-headed, I guess, magoo, you'd call that, or woolly bugger. Oops. And I'm not sure if you can see the body, but it's straggle, that straggle fritz there, and it's got a collar of the green partridge. That guy there has been my go-to smelty pattern, damsel pattern right through, probably for the last 2 seasons there. It is a fulling mill fly, so I'm sure you'll be able to go to the fulling mill fly website and source it there. I get all of my flies from the fly fishery in Melbourne. Yeah, cracking fly, strong hook. But that chartreuse bead just lights them up. You know, with the other ones that, you know, common, which is the same one I've been using with the fritz there, like the orange beadhead. But I find that chartreuse beadhead, I don't know, it's probably like 3 to 1 or something. It just really lights them up, especially when they're smelting. And that's another subject, when I'm using, you know, smelting feeds, I'm always using 2 flies as well. That one there, which is the same sort of straggle, but it's a really long straggle. And it's got almost like a Christmas green bead head with an orange collar. It's got a lot of body. You can't really see that, but it's more like try and get you see that contrast? It's like a golden olive, then with the green tail. That golden olive fritz just really pops. Like when it's in the water, it gives it a lot of body. But generally, off all these flies, I'm trailing the second fly, which is more of a natural fly, and you cannot go past this fly, and even by itself, and that is a BMS. Classic BMS, okay? Trail that guy off any of these when you got smelters that one, and trail it a good meter, 1.2 meters behind. Make sure there's a good distance, and those two flies there, yeah, killers, mate, absolute killers.
Scott, I have a quick question on flies, if I may.
Yes.
Just in terms of us developing fly tires, can you direct us towards some recipes for the flies that you've talked about tonight?
Yeah, I can certainly send out that, the image of the Scott's whatever secret flies.
Yep.
That's the name of those flies. My fly tying has suffered since I've started guiding in terms of just going through the sheer amount of numbers of flies. So I don't really have any. I usually look at flies and just tie them with whatever.
Mine suffered when I became a dad, but
Yeah.
you'll know about that soon.
Yeah. Just chewing through so many flies. I'm mainly choosing commercial flies these days, and I've found they work extremely well. And if you get those good branded flies as well, they cost a little bit more money. That's the go. But yeah, I'll certainly have a look at some. I'll see if I can dig up some, especially those Czech nymphy sort of stuff that I've been using a lot.
Yeah, those look pretty cool.
Yeah, they got that thin. For the rivers, they got that thin. They got that super thin. I was trying to get a body profile here. Super.
Yep.
Super
Cool.
thin body, so they just have that perfect midge shape about, and on that curved hook, they just really, and they got that ribbing. They just look great, and you got all different bead colors. You got silver beads. You've got, I'm usually still always running different, trying different things. If fish aren't going, I'll try, fluoro orange bead, fluoro pink, silver bead. Silver bead, I'm really finding silver beaded flies of those Czech style nymphs for midge feeders. And this is only since last season and this season to be, really, really good on the midge feeders. Yeah.
Yeah. And that actually raises an interesting point of view, an interesting question, if you will. Is sort of a what if question. So, you, not me, you walk up to a body of water and you look at the circumstances and you make a decision. And then what if that doesn't work? And then what if that doesn't work? That process of elimination would, I think, for most of us be very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. The process I would go through first is not fly change, but depth change and spacing of your top and your top drop and your point fly. I use that, move that indicator a hell of a lot more than I change flies. I'm more thinking about what are the fish doing? Are they lethargic? If you're getting a lot of fish in your top dropper, what's that telling you? The fish in mid-water, they're searching. There's stuff happening. So when you're getting stuff on the point fly a lot, really, it's just because you put the fly in front of the fish most of the time. Hot heads and things like that. Like I said, remember, fish through the winter months go through spawn modes. So I'm not going to talk about rods and cones in fish's eyes because that's a bit getting too full on. But all you have to know is their trout's eyes, particularly smaller trout under 2 pound, their rods and cones change quite a lot to pick up fluorescence. So it's a really important thing to put, collars and things, little bits of fluorescence, bead heads, things like that. Yeah. But I wouldn't.
Yeah, great point of view. No pun intended.
Yeah. So I would think more about moving around the lake a bit more. Like I said, explore the shallows, explore the mid-water, the deep, go through that water column with your change. I wouldn't change my fly much. The red buzz will be in there and one of those little bead heads. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
No worries, Bruce.
Got a few more questions just come through on the chat, Scott. Is there a fly line you would recommend for midge fishing with the line characteristics weight that you like?
Yep. 6-weight rod, just a 6-weight weight forward fly line. I'm always thinking slightly aggressive taper, not one that's going to dump because you have got that, you've got an indicator to fly, so you don't want too much line speed, but you do want to, the flies to land out nicely. So just a nice weight forward floating fly line, is the way to go. Just a medium aggressive, not a big, like an aggressive taper, like a really short head or anything like that. Just a nice 40-foot head section, a nice front taper. Because when they do start rising, you do want to present well, and you're not going to change your fly line from the static fishing. You just want to be able to present and not dump.
Okay, that's great. And another one, which months are best? Will midge fishing be the go-to on lakes until September or beyond?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've really found a really good peak around, I would say, late April and May to be a really good time to get on them. But like I said, this is about winter midge fishing. It's the only food source throughout the winter months. So it's a cracking, it's the fly to use throughout the winter months for me, and smelting patterns. But yeah, so, and then it picks up even September. Well, when it starts to warm up, the midge hatches get thicker. So yeah, September can be an excellent time. Even when when the first duns are hatching, the very few fish get on the first dun hatches because they're still on the midge, and they're not like you and I, Barney, where I'm going to use Barney as an example here, where we love eating hamburgers, and then we go for some chips and some, back to the burger. When the fish is just on the chips there, that's all they're eating. Like, they're not intelligent enough like you and I, Barney, to go eat the hamburger and the chips. So they just stay on the French fries. So even though, those mayflies have got way more protein, I guess, than the midge, I'm guessing, but they'll stay on those midge right through summer. Yeah.
I didn't know that you knew me so well, Scotty.
And thanks, Scott. There's one other question about other fly patterns. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing this right. It's the Welsh one, Dalbach, crunches, blobs. Yep. Any of those?
Yeah, Dalbach's not one that I use the most, but yeah, like soft tackle wets and things like that are going to work well. If you're going to pull flies, like if I want to pull flies, strip flies, mugoos and things like that, you can trail soft hackle wets such as black pennels, those English style black flies. Use black flies like those crunches and Dalbachs that have got, and that pronounced ribbing. So yeah, I think those Dalbachs, I don't use them enough myself, but I think they'd be great during a midge hatch, is particularly when they're active, when they're moving a bit. Figure eighting them through the midge hatch would be, they'd be great flies to use as well.
Okay, has anyone got any more questions?
I do.
Yeah. Hello.
Scott, do you ever use anything but floating line? Can you use something like a hover for your midge?
Yeah, that's another good question, like hover lines and things like that. You can in deeper water and places like that. I'm really focusing in on the Ballarat Lakes, where from shoreline fishing as well, where we're mainly fishing shallower areas. So yeah, hovers, even intermediate places like off a boat, like in Yukonbean and places like that, they're justified. But no, I've never found a need. If I want to get a bit deep, I find just the unweighted, two unweighted flies naked, just figure eighted, just sweeping through that water column as it naturally would and back up. I do like the indicator for that reason, that it holds your flies in one. You can strip and just leave it for 20 seconds, and just hold next to a weed bed and wait for that fish to cruise past. So that's why I do like that indicator method. It seems to be, it's a deadly method. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Good question.
Any more? Okay, well, I think we might wrap that up. I think we topped out at about 61, 62 participants, which is great. Many thanks to Sean from Red Tag for setting this up with Scott. We are still recording it, and it will be up on the Red Tag YouTube channel as well, sometime maybe later this week.
Scott, do you ever use a washing line?
The old washing line, yeah. I'm not sure who's talking to me, but the what's referred to then is like a dry fly at your point, in Victoria, we're only allowed to use 2 flies. So we're talking about washing line is you dry fly at your point and then you're sinking or wet fly in the middle hanging. No, I tend to just go off the shank. No, just dry fly and off the back there and just shortening up or lengthening that dropper length depending on the activity of the fish. I find that works really well. It doesn't affect the dry fly. When they want to eat that dry fly, it does not affect the dry fly either.
Oh, and just unless people, for those people who are not looking at the comments, Marion's just made a comment that at box stock she's been using an emerger tip line with a cruncher and a dial back. Yeah,
working well for you, Marion?
She says so. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, those older style flies work. You know, they work extremely well. But like I said, with your fly tying, pronounced ribbing, just really make it stand out. Those ribbing and black flies, darker coloured flies, good contrast.
I got 8 rounds the other day with those flies.
In Bostock?
Yeah, all little ones, but they were fun.
Hell of a lot of fun, yeah. That's good because, I mean, Bostock, when I was a kid, used to hold some really nice trout, particularly down the creek end. The creek used to flow near the railway line. There's a stunning bit of water. Hopefully one day it comes back to be a good fishery again.
May I make a comment?
Please do. Yep.
Yeah, in relation to someone who questioned about the strike indicators homemade with the wool, in fly life, probably about 20 years ago, I made some. I've since discontinued them, but it was strike indicator type yarn and wound up with spider wire, and you could slide it up and down the line as easy as pie. I can search for it and then pass it through Neil Vincent to actually get it through if someone hasn't got it. But if you've got a full Fly Life library, you'll find it in one of the past issues from probably about 15, 20 years ago.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
We'll look for that one. If anyone's got issue 7 of Fly Life and feels the need to donate it, Red Tag just in that one, so thought I'd just jump in.
Yeah,
Barney,
you floated a dead horse, David.
Yeah.
Barney, when did you say the club has the Red Tag Club has a trip up to Millbrook?
Yeah, look, I just locked that in today, Scott, with John and Mark. We're locked in, not for a while yet. We're coming up on the first weekend in December on the 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Beautiful, fantastic. Look forward to hanging out with you guys. It'll be great weekend.
All right. Well, I might call it unless it's a very, very last question from anybody.
Not a question, just a congratulations. Well done, guys. Loved it all.
Yeah, thanks again.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks for the, like I said, thanks for Barney, the president, and also all the members that are, on their computers tonight instead of with their loved ones. Watching me, my big head on the screen. So thank you very much. As Red Tag has got I've helped you guys out and come to plenty of your meetings. You've got a good active club, so keep it that way. And looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I can see the Polish rooster is there with his loved one, that pussycat up the top there.
Still
Scott,
here.
On behalf of everyone, thanks again, mate. This is your first effort at a Zoom meeting. I'll just say, wow, you look like an old hand at it. You did it flawlessly and very, very well done. One thing I will pick you up on that I'm not going to do, I'm not going to get into this naked style drawing flies across the surface in the middle of winter.
Nah, we'll see you in summer.
All right, and thanks, David, for being the host, and for Sean for coordinating it with Scott for tonight. And tight lines, everyone, over the winter months. This COVID is gradually easing, but we still need to be safe out there. So take care. Good night, all.
Good night.